Imagine a grand house with ghosts and lies. Someone is stealing your voice. This book builds empathy, helps you spot manipulators, and makes you sound smart in conversations. Keep watching my summary, then go read Cape Fever by Nadia Davids.
Picture this. You are standing right in the center of the drawing room at 23 Heron Place. It's late afternoon. You know, that really specific time of day when the light just starts to fail and the shadows stretch out incredibly long and thin across the Yellowwood floorboards.
Yeah, that heavy twilight.
Exactly.
Right.
The air in this room is just, it's heavy. It is completely thick. You take a breath and it actually catches in the back of your throat because there's this sharp medicinal sting lingering in the air.
Eucalyptus oil.
Right. It's Mrs. Hadding's skin cream. That pervasive, almost suffocating scent she carries with her absolutely everywhere. And right now, in this moment, it is violently mixing with the dry, choking dust of old paper.
And you aren't just standing there empty-handed either. You are feeling the weight of something very specific in your right hand.
Yeah, you are holding an iron poker. Just feel the absolute unforgiving density of it.
So heavy.
The metal is cold, it's unyielding, and it just pulls your arm down. It grounds you, even as the entire world you thought you understood is, well, it's tipping wildly on its axis.
Because you are Soraya.
You are 19 years old, a domestic worker in this sprawling, decaying house in 1920s Cape Town, and you are staring down at a desk that is just scattered with letters.
And you can hear it, can't you? That blood thumping in your ears?
Yes.
A frantic, rhythmic drumming. It's literally the sound of your own heart trying to process a betrayal so profound, it just completely defies logic.
I mean, you are looking at the ink on these
Yeah.
pages, and you are recognizing the loops, the specific slant of the handwriting.
It's her handwriting, Mrs. Hadding's.
The frail, supposedly charitable older woman who offered to help you write letters to your fiancé Noor because you told her you couldn't write.
But she hasn't just been taking dictation. She hasn't been helping you at all.
No. As you read these letters, the microscopic horror of the whole situation dawns on you, cold and totally paralyzing. She's colonized your voice. She has stolen your identity. She has written these passionate, intimate words, forged declarations of love, described kisses you never even shared.
Built an entire false intimacy.
Built an entire false intimacy with the man you love. And then in the final letters, she has written a cruel, dismissive end to the engagement, all of it signed with your name.
It is an absolute erasure of the self, a theft of the highest, most intimate order.
Yeah.
It's not just that she ended the relationship, it's that she climbed inside your skin to do it. She puppeted your emotions just to serve her own ends.
And as you stand there, just suffocating in this realization, gripping this iron poker, you realize you are not alone in the room.
Oh, the temperature drops.
It drops sharply. It's a chill that completely seeps into your bones. There is a third presence,
Fatima.
the gray woman. You don't just see her, you feel the history she represents. You can almost see the ash falling softly from her spectral dress, leaving this faint, damning gray film on the intricate Persian carpets.
Because she was the maid before you?
She died in this house,
Yeah.
and now she is standing close, impossibly close.
Whispering. Well, chanting, really. It's a single, terrifying command, echoing from the deepest, most violent scars of the Cape's history.
She is urging you to lift that heavy iron poker.
To bring it down. Yeah.
Welcome. We are incredibly glad you are here with us in the dim light of this meandering, incredibly necessary autopsy.
Because this is definitely not a deep dive where we're just going to summarize a plot, right? We're not giving you a neat list of characters or telling you who did what.
No, absolutely not. We are here to completely dissect Nadia Davids' brilliant novel, Cape Fever. We are going to pry open the floorboards of a colonial Gothic environment that acts as a literal pressure cooker for the human soul.
We are walking directly into the haunted house of the British Empire's legacy. We are examining South Africa in the 1920s, a place incredibly burdened by its past, and we're going to look at the spectral score settlers of history.
The entities that refuse to be swept away. We're going to look at the deep psychological violence of domestic boredom, the sheer corrosive power of having your existence reduced to polishing silver for an empire that is already completely dead. And look, I'm just going to put my cards on the table right now, right at the beginning of this. I read this text, I look at the character of Mrs. Hadding, and I see an absolute irredeemable manifestation of colonial rot. When I look at what she does with those letters, I see a parasite, someone who feeds on the youth, the vitality, and the literal identity of her servant, because her own empire, her own life, is entirely hollow.
Well, I fundamentally disagree with you on that.
I knew you would.
I do. I disagree very firmly. And I hear your anger, and I want to be really clear to you, the listener, that that anger is entirely justified by the text. The actions are horrific.
Beyond horrific.
But I think to view Mrs. Hadding simply as a two-dimensional villain, like a mustache-twirling colonial monster, is to miss the profound, tragic lushness of David's prose.
Lushness. It's theft.
It misses the blinding, maddening grief that breaks these characters. It's a tragedy of what Mrs. Hadding herself calls mad luck. It is about the collateral damage of a world war and the terrifying places the human mind goes when it is just starved of connection.
We will definitely get into all of that. We have plenty of time to explore every agonizing corner of this. So let's start by walking into the physical space where all of this plays out.
The architecture of Suffocation.
23 Heron Place.
Yeah.
Because the house itself is a character, right?
Mm.
Soraya arrives at this grand gabled house looking out over the dipped bowl of the harbor city of Cape Town. And from the outside, it projects this immense power and status.
But the moment you step inside, the grandness is revealed to be a total illusion.
Completely.
Yeah.
The house has, as Mrs. Hadding describes it, cold bones.
It creaks. It groans in the wind. It's a structure that is actively mourning its own past. Think about the very first time Soraya walks down the main corridor. The light is incredibly dim.
Yeah, that twilight again.
And she notices these variously sized rectangles on the walls, solid blocks of deep maroon, shades darker than the rest of the faded, sun-bleached wallpaper.
The ghosts of sold paintings.
Precisely. They are precise, permanent shadows. The house is defined not by what is currently there, but by what has been lost. What has been slowly, quietly sold off just to maintain the illusion of status.
Her fortune was likely decimated in the Great War.
Right. And now she is literally surrounded by the negative space of her former wealth. Every time she walks down that hall, she is walking past the glaring evidence of her own decline.
And because of that decline, she is obsessively, violently fixated on the physical preservation of what little remains. I mean, she gives Soraya these incredibly specific, overbearing instructions about the Yellowwood floors.
Oh, the floors. Mind you, work with the grain, not against it, or you'll do irreparable damage.
And she justifies this by saying her late husband took the preservation of the Cape's good homes very seriously. But we have to really pause and look at what that actually means. What is a good home in this specific context?
Well, to her, it represents the pinnacle of colonial achievement, the settling and taming of the land.
Right, but I argue that this preservation obsession is inherently violent. When she obsesses over preserving the Cape's good homes, she is violently hoarding stolen land. These good homes were built on the displacement of indigenous people. They were built by the labor of enslaved people. So her obsession with keeping the Yellowwood polished isn't just an old woman's quirk. It's a desperate attempt to maintain an oppressive system that can no longer sustain itself.
That's a powerful systemic critique. It is. But let's look at how the environment actually fights back against her. The dust.
The mountain dust.
Yes. The text spends so much time on the relentless daily dust blown straight off the mountain, brought in by the famous Cape wind. It traps itself in the intricate wooden screens. It settles on the lace doilies. It weaves into the heavy brocade curtains.
Daily dust, dust to dust.
It's a losing battle. The environment is slowly burying them. The physical dust of the house cannot be swept away permanently because the house is actively breathing out its past.
And look at how Mrs. Hadding physically moves through this space. As the day unfolds, she moves away from the sun.
Yeah.
She tracks the shadow. She retreats, quite literally, into the twilight of the house to avoid the heat and the light. It's a physical retreat into a dying past. And this is where the pacing of the book becomes so crucial.
The slow burn.
The novel is notoriously slow. It's a feverish slow burn. And I think some readers might find that frustrating, waiting for something to happen. But I argue that this pacing is a brilliant, intentional reflection of the suffocating nature of colonialism itself.
How so?
It is a system designed to trap you in repetitive, meaningless labor while slowly draining your life force. I reject any romanticization of Heron Place. Her retreat into the twilight isn't just sad. It's the inevitable decay of a parasite that has run out of hosts.
Huh. I hear the structural argument, I really do. But I'm asking you to look at the human being underneath the rot. David's prose forces us to confront the tragic beauty in Mrs. Hadding's desperation.
There is no beauty in it for Soraya.
But look at the object she clings to. The laughing stone man at the front door. The ivory elephant. You call them colonial trophies, and objectively, yes, they are.
They absolutely are.
But to her, in her daily reality, they are the pathetic, heavy anchors of a lonely widow trapped by her own history. She is rattling around in a tomb, desperately trying to keep the silver polished while her entire world ends. There's a profound, deeply uncomfortable loneliness in that reality which demands our empathy.
Even if that loneliness turns her into a monster. Does trauma excuse the infliction of trauma on someone entirely powerless?
Grief often twists people into shapes they wouldn't otherwise take. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains the mechanism of the harm. It's the difference between malicious evil and desperate survival. Yeah.
Let's talk about the entities that actually are that past then. Because Mrs. Hadding's obsession with preserving the house actually traps the past inside it. And because she won't let the history breathe, the psychological trauma of the house literally manifests into physical entities. The ones who cannot be swept away like the mountain dust.
The Gray Women.
The mechanics of haunting in this novel are absolutely fascinating. They break away from traditional Western ghost stories completely. Yeah, there's no rattling chains here.
Right. Davids doesn't just give us a standard Victorian specter. She introduces the Gray Women. They are explicitly described as score settlers, debt collectors, anger gatherers.
Unseen by most, covered in the thinnest coat of gray ash.
And specifically, we meet Fatima, the previous maid. She, as Mrs. Hadding chillingly puts it when Soraya arrives, came with the house.
Think about the absolute horror of that phrasing. A human being reduced to an architectural fixture.
She worked there since she was a girl. She nursed Mrs. Hadding through the foreigner's flu, caught it herself, and died in that very house. And now she roams the halls, leaving a faint, physical trail of ash on the carpets.
If we really want to understand the mechanism behind these ghosts, we have to take a meandering but absolutely essential detour into the history that created them.
The 1918 foreigner's flu, the Spanish influenza.
Davids heavily roots the supernatural elements of this novel in immense real-world historical trauma. We need to talk about how mass grief alters the fabric of a society. The flu devastated the Cape.
In the text, we learn it claims Soraya's little sister, Baby, and it claimed old Fatima.
The text handles this mass death so viscerally. There's that incredible haunting detail when Soraya goes back down into the district, her home neighborhood. She sees their local doctor, the loved doctor who wears a fez handing out masks to a mother whose child is sick. And Soraya reflects on how utterly strange it is. For 2 solid years, the entire city wore masks every single day. The streets were filled with people hiding their faces, terrified of the air itself. And now, they walk around as though their uncovered faces have always been safe.
It's a collective trauma that the city is still actively processing. Think about what happens to a community when a disease sweeps through and violently removes a huge percentage of the population in a matter of months.
That changes everything.
The sudden absence of people changes the physical layout of a city. Houses sit empty, roles are left unfilled. The grief is so dense, so heavy, that in the logic of this novel, it literally thins the veil between the living and the dead.
The mass death acts as a catalyst.
Exactly. It brings the spirits into the physical realm because there is simply too much unresolved pain for the earth to hold it all.
The Gray Women aren't just spooky additions to make it a Gothic novel.
Yeah.
They are the unresolved grief of the city made manifest. They are the women who were hurt, who were overlooked, who died in service to a system that didn't value their humanity.
But this raises a crucial, fundamental question about how we interpret the supernatural in literature. How do you understand these ghosts?
Well, I'll tell you exactly how I interpret them. I insist that the Gray Women Fatima and even Rosa, the girl in the painting, who looks exactly like Soraya and who eventually speaks, they are the inevitable psychological manifestation of white systemic guilt and unpunished abuse.
Oh, I see where you're going.
They are the internalized trauma of the colonized mind. Think about Soraya's situation. She is completely isolated. She is suffocating in this house, cut off from her family, her culture, her language. Her psyche has to split to survive. The ghosts are her own repressed anger, screaming back at her. Fatima telling her to use the poker. That's Soraya's own subconscious begging for liberation.
No, I have to passionately push back on that.
Why? It makes perfect psychological sense.
Because to reduce Fatima and Rosa to mere psychological manifestations, to apply a clinical Western interpretation of trauma to them, robs them of their agency within the world of the novel.
It doesn't rob them, it internalizes them.
But Davids is writing within a cultural tradition where the spiritual realm is real, active, and present. Fatima is not just Soraya's subconscious projecting onto the walls. She is a distinct entity. She has her own desires, her own loyalties, and her own fury.
But she represents Soraya.
She physically interacts with the world. She cleans the scribbles off the wallpaper in the bird's room. She leaves a physical bolt on the door for the next girl to find.
Okay, yes, the physical actions.
That is not a psychological projection. That is a spirit exerting physical force on the living world. And Rosa, the painting. She isn't just a symbol of the colonized subject. She is a trapped soul. She speaks, she claps her hands, she demands to be seen by Soraya.
Right.
To say they are just in Soraya's head diminishes their power. They represent true, terrifying spiritual agency. They are the land and the history demanding a reckoning. They are real.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say you're right. Let's say they are entirely real within the narrative. If they are real and they are trapped in that house, then Soraya is a living, breathing 19-year-old girl trapped in a tomb of bored, restless, angry spirits.
Right.
How does a living girl survive that environment without losing her mind?
She survives through a highly calibrated psychological defense mechanism, the psychology of the obedient face.
The obedient face. Let's really look under the hood of this concept because it is the core survival mechanism of the entire novel. Before Soraya even steps foot in Heron Place, her mother gives her 2 strict lessons for going into service for white families. First, clean as though you were caring for your own home. Take pride in the work itself, not the employer. Second, and most importantly, always keep something back. There is no need for them to know what you were truly thinking.
It is a profound instruction in intentional dissociation.
Yeah.
Let's break down the psychology here from a few different angles because it is brilliantly layered.
Okay.
First, we have to look at it as pure physical protection. In a colonial, deeply unequal power dynamic, showing true emotion is physically dangerous.
Exactly.
If Soraya shows anger, she could be beaten or fired without wages. If she shows disgust, she is insubordinate. If she shows excessive joy, she might be seen as taking liberties. The obedient face is a literal shield. It keeps the physical body safe by entirely hiding the mind.
Right. It's what she calls one face for them, another for us. And I think anyone listening today can relate to this on some level, even if the stakes are different.
Oh, for sure.
Think about code switching in a corporate environment. Think about the emotional labor required in the modern service industry. When you are dealing with a deeply unreasonable, hostile customer, and you force your face into that bland, polite smile while your mind is screaming, that is a microscopic version of what Soraya is doing.
Yes.
But for Soraya, the stakes are her entire existence.
It's the performance of subservience. But then we have to look at the second angle, the obedient face as an emotional prison.
This is the tragic part.
The tragedy of this defense mechanism is that, as Soraya notes in the text, it works too well. Over time, the physiological toll of constantly suppressing your own reactions begins to alter your baseline psychology. Eventually, the obedient face becomes the face you wear all day without even trying. It calcifies.
Yeah.
And the danger is that it separates her from her own people. When she finally gets a day off and goes back down to the quarter to her family, she struggles to drop the mask. She feels alienated from her own joy. It isolates her in her own mind.
It's terrifying. And the third angle, which I think is the most insidious, is how the obedient face functions as a mirror.
Yes.
The mask is blank by design.
Yeah.
It gives nothing away, which means Mrs. Hadding can project whatever she wants onto it. It reflects the employer's narcissism perfectly.
Wow. Yeah.
Mrs. Hadding looks at Soraya's blank, polite face and sees a grateful, simple, happy servant who absolutely loves to listen to her endless stories about her son, Timothy. She never sees the seething intelligence, the deep resentment, or the vibrant inner life beneath the surface.
No, she doesn't.
The mask allows the oppressor to maintain their comfortable delusion that the system is benign.
Exactly. It makes the oppression comfortable for the oppressor. But what happens behind that mask? What is Soraya actually experiencing while she maintains this blank exterior?
The absolute mind-numbing, corrosive boredom of domestic service. Let's not gloss over this.
No, we can't.
The novel spends pages describing the scrubbing, the boiling, the polishing of the few remaining silver fish knives that no one ever uses, dusting the intricate wooden screens, only for the mountain wind to fill them with dust again an hour later.
It's exhausting just to read.
The repetitive Sisyphean physical labor creates a pressure system. It is a form of psychological violence to force a brilliant young mind to perform meaningless tasks in silence for years. And that pressure leads inevitably to the subtle acts of sabotage.
Ah, the sabotage.
Right.
This is where the tension in the house really ratchets up.
Let's list them because they are brilliant.
Yep.
Soraya spits in the cooking pot.
Mm.
She deliberately drops Mrs. Hadding's mother's prized willow-patterned sugar bowl, letting it shatter on the floor and politely claiming it slipped from her hands. She intentionally slips eucalyptus oil onto the floorboards right by Mrs. Hadding's bed, calculating the friction, hoping to cause a fall.
Which results in Mrs. Hadding tearing her nightgown and badly bruising herself.
Right, and she internally contemplates buying rat poison. Now, I look at this and I defend it completely.
You do.
Yes. This is a highly calculated moral Amok against a violently oppressive employer who literally owns her time and suffocates her existence.
Yeah.
It is the only power she has. It's asymmetrical warfare.
I am deeply, deeply troubled by this interpretation.
Why? She's fighting back.
Defending the physical sabotage as moral is a very dark path, and I think it misses the tragedy of what the house is doing to her. The environment is actively degrading Soraya's soul. That is the true horror here.
Yeah.
The colonial system, the isolation, the relentless mind-altering boredom. It is turning her into the very monster the system expects her to be. It is corrosive to her humanity. When she stands there and visualizes boiling water floating up out of the pot and emptying itself onto the old woman's head, that is not a political victory. That is the rot of the house infecting her spirit.
But she has to fight back. What is the alternative? Passive compliance until she dies like Fatima and becomes a ghost made of ash?
No.
If you are trapped in an unfair system where you have zero institutional power, that urge to let the plate slip to cause a minor injury to the person tormenting you, that is human survival.
Not by losing her humanity. Retaining her humanity is the only true resistance. And to keep her soul from rotting in this boredom and violence, Soraya doesn't just rely on petty physical sabotage. She has a much more profound mechanism for survival.
She mentally escapes.
Yes, she retreats into the mythology of her people, the stories.
The storytelling, yes. This is where the text literally bursts into color, contrasting with the gray ash of Heron Place. Soraya gathers the neighborhood children on the hill overlooking the city. She chants moon to star, moon to star. And she tells these incredible, vivid stories, the sea woman and the soap woman.
What's fascinating here is the cultural context Davids weaves into these narratives. Before we dissect the mechanics of the stories themselves, we have to understand the soil they are born from. We need to meander into the history of the quarter in District 6.
Let's go there. Because the novel paints this incredibly vivid sensory picture of the community long before the apartheid era forced removals that loom historically over this text.
Yeah.
District 6 was a real place, a vibrant heart of Cape Town that was later bulldozed by the apartheid government. But in the 1920s of this novel, it is alive. The smells alone. The air is thick with methy, cardamom, fish fresh from the ocean being fried on open fires.
It's a true cultural melting pot. You have the Egyptian oil seller with his tiny glass bottles painstakingly painted with pale gold flowers, holding heavy scents of neroli and jasmine. You have the Japanese martial artist living next door, the sound of him breaking wooden blocks echoing through the alleys. It is a place of teeming, chaotic, vibrant life. It is the exact opposite of the sterile, dusty, quiet tomb of Heron Place.
It really is.
And crucially, it is a place where faith, magic, and daily survival are intimately, inextricably intertwined.
And it is here, in this vibrant community, that we learn about the concept of the Ratib. Soraya's father is a calligrapher. He draws protective prayers known as rakams for the community. But the text also mentions the Ratib, the ritual piercing of the body with sharp swords and steel skewers. It's a religious demonstration to show the miracle of bloodlessness.
Let's explain the mechanism of the Ratib because it's vital. It is a demonstration of absolute faith. The belief is that if the body is entirely in the care of the beloved, the divine, it is capable of transcending physical reality.
Right.
The sharp steel goes through the cheek or the arm, but because of the spiritual state of the practitioner, no blood is spilled. The pain is neutralized by faith.
But I want to contrast that religious bloodlessness with the blood ink of Soraya's own stories, because Soraya's stories are definitely not bloodless.
Not at all.
In Soraya's tale, the sea woman wears a black abaya and deliberately seeps exactly 99 drops of black blood into the water. It forms a dark, protective cloud around her. And when the arrogant, pale-skinned sailor dives down to capture her, specifically thinking he can steal her ink to write a book of his travels, she doesn't just swim away.
No, she fights back.
She grabs him with the 8 arms of an octopus. She holds him down and washes his face until the skin is stripped entirely off. The text says, He was no longer a man, he was a warning.
Wow.
And the soap woman. She makes a baby out of stolen ash from wealthy fireplaces and binds it with 3 drops of precious geranium oil just to satisfy the grieving visitor in blue. These stories are Soraya's true, authentic voice.
They are.
But we have to note how inherently violent they are. The sailor literally loses his face. The soap baby is born from the ash of burned things.
Yeah.
I argue that this is Soraya subconsciously processing her own trauma and the violence of the colony. Her stories aren't just whimsical fairy tales to entertain children. They are coded narratives of resistance, retribution, and survival. The blood ink is her weapon against a world that demands her bloodlessness.
That is a brilliant distinction. The blood ink is her weapon, yes. It is her voice. Her unique, powerful, undeniable voice, which sets the stage for the ultimate, most devastating violation in the entire novel.
The theft of that very voice.
Exactly. We are back in the house, the writing hours, Thursday at dusk.
Mrs. Hadding says, the perfect time, Soraya, almost the end of the working week. But as Soraya notes internally, Thursday at dusk is an uncanny hour in her culture.
It is the eve of the holiest day.
Right, it's the twilight hour. The specific hour when the jinn, the spirits, are abroad in the world. It is a time of extreme vulnerability.
Let's set the scene of this betrayal carefully. Soraya cannot read or write English. She needs to communicate with Noor, her fiancé, who is far away. Mrs. Hadding offers to write the letters for her.
Which seems on the surface like an act of immense cross-class charity, a bonding moment between employer and employee.
But then, the reveal. The devastating, gut-wrenching reveal we talked about at the very beginning when Soraya finally breaks into the locked desk drawer.
She finds the copies of the letters. And we have to look at the sheer scale of the deception. Mrs. Hadding hasn't just been tweaking the grammar. She has been forging an entire relationship as Soraya.
Yeah.
She's written profound declarations of fidelity. She has described physical kisses and deep longing. She has built a complex, false emotional intimacy.
And why did she do it? To end the relationship. She sent Noor an old jumper that belonged to her son Timothy, claiming Soraya knitted it. She manipulated Noor, through Soraya's stolen voice, into breaking the engagement because she fundamentally wanted to keep Soraya trapped at Heron Place forever.
I am disgusted. Every time I read this section, my skin just crawls.
Yeah.
We have to unpack this maternal pathology because it is monstrous. Think about the modern equivalent. Mrs. Hadding forging those letters isn't just cruel. It's a form of 1920s emotional identity theft. It's like a hacker taking over your social media, messaging your partner, and destroying your relationship while you watch, completely powerless.
It is a profound violation.
But worse, because it's your actual future. She literally colonized Soraya's identity. She slipped under Soraya's skin, took down her private thoughts, and consumed them to feed her own emptiness. It is a calculated, evil act of vampirism. I cannot see her as anything other than a villain who intentionally destroyed a young woman's life simply to avoid being alone in a big house. You're sighing, but I'm right.
You know, as horrific as she is, I actually found myself feeling this profound, deeply uncomfortable pity for Alice Hadding.
Pity. You cannot be serious.
I am. I'm asking you to look deeper, to look at the other stack of letters Soraya finds hidden in that same desk, the letters from the asylum in England.
The telegrams about Timothy.
Yes, the telegrams. No improvement, stop, instead deterioration and unwillingness, stop. Poor response to continued treatment, stop. A visit from you before the end is advised, stop.
Yeah, that's dark.
Timothy was the knight of the sky, the golden boy who went to the front at 18. He is not living a glamorous, wealthy expat life in London, as Mrs. Hadding constantly tells Soraya. He is locked in an asylum, completely broken by shell shock. He hasn't spoken a single word in years.
He's dying.
He is physically deteriorating. He is dying. And the doctors, the arrogant clinical colonial doctors, refuse to let his own mother see him. They blame her for questioning their harsh methods. They explicitly tell her to stay away from her own son. I want you to imagine that. Imagine the blinding, suffocating, reality-breaking agony of that mother.
But that does not excuse what she did to Soraya.
I am not excusing the harm. I am explaining the mechanism of the tragedy, the mad luck. She is a broken, grieving mother whose mind has simply snapped under the weight of an unbearable reality. She cannot save her son. She cannot speak to her son. She cannot even touch him.
So she just steals someone else's life?
Her mind breaks, and she clings to the only human connection she has left in the world, Soraya. She doesn't write those letters out of a calculated sociopathic desire for evil. She writes them out of a desperate, insane grasp for a reality she can actually control.
It's still abuse.
She writes love letters to Noor because she is entirely starved for love. She's starved for life. She's trying to experience youth and vitality by siphoning it from Soraya. It is horrific. Yes, it is deeply abusive, but it is born of a pain so profound it literally shatters the rational mind.
It is parasitical. She used Soraya's actual life, Soraya's actual love, as a literal plaything to soothe her own grief. And let's not forget the other things she did. She kept Soraya from her own father's deathbed. Soraya didn't get to say goodbye to her father when he passed away because Mrs. Hadding decided she was too frail that day and needed Soraya to stay and serve tea. The limits of our empathy must end where the colonization of another person's soul begins. You cannot justify destroying an innocent girl just because you are sad. It's true.
It is unforgivable. I can see that entirely. It is unforgivable. But to call her purely, simply evil is to ignore the horrific collateral damage of the Great War. It ignores the universal, terrifying power of a mother's grief gone mad. It flattens the complexity of human suffering into a cartoon.
Well, whether it's grief or evil, this ultimate violation pushes the pressure cooker of the house beyond its absolute limit. It summons the historical rage of the Cape. It brings us to the climax we described at the beginning. Amok.
Soraya finds the letters. She reads them. The betrayal crystallizes in her mind, and the gray women arrive.
Fatima chants it over and over.
Amok.
Amok.
We have to unpack the historical weight of that word. If we look at the context Davids is invoking here, amok in Western psychology is often reduced to a generic term for running wild or a sudden violent frenzy.
Right.
But in the context of 1920s Cape Town, and specifically within Malay and Indonesian diasporas brought there by the Dutch East India Company, it invokes the historical legacy of enslaved people. Men who had been pushed past the brink of human endurance. Men who ran from the brutal wine farms, setting fire to buildings, screaming for freedom, demanding violent retribution against their owners. It is the salt in the wounds. The ghosts of the Cape are surrounding Soraya, and they are demanding a historical reckoning. They want blood for blood.
And Soraya grabs the heavy iron poker. She chases Mrs. Hadding up the stairs, the old woman terrified, scrambling away. Soraya screams at her, "What have you done? What have you done?"
It's so intense.
And I will say it again. I said it when I first read it. She should have used the poker. The entire slow, agonizing, suffocating pace of the book demanded a violent physical release. The architecture of that house, the system it represents, needed to be shattered. The oppressor needed to be physically struck down to balance the scales.
No.
Yes.
If she brings that poker down, she loses absolutely everything. Think about the mechanics of the story she told the children. If she strikes Mrs. Hadding, she becomes the violent sailor in her own story. She becomes the monster the colonial state insists she is.
But she'd have justice.
She would be arrested immediately. She would be hanged for the murder of a white woman, her life truly over, and the system would feel entirely justified in its prejudice. The absolute brilliance of this novel is what Soraya chooses to do instead of physical violence.
She drops the poker.
She drops the iron poker. It clatters against the floorboards. She corners Mrs. Hadding, pinning her against the wall with the sheer force of her presence. And she doesn't strike her physically. She strikes her with the truth.
Right.
She says, "He's in a hospital, can't even feed himself or talk."
She says the unsayable.
Exactly. She strips away the delusion Mrs. Hadding has hidden behind for years. She forces the oppressor to look directly into the abyss of her own ruined life. That is a far more devastating, permanent, and profoundly human victory than physical murder. She breaks the psychological illusion, not the physical skull. He refuses to let the rod of the house turn her into a killer.
And then the aftermath. She leaves. She walks calmly down the stairs. She takes her exact back wages from the desk drawer, not a single penny more. She writes a note that simply says wage and leaves it on the desk to prove, unequivocally, that she is the honest one in this dynamic.
And she walks out the front door, leaving the haunted house behind her.
Which brings us to the resolution of the novel, the final verdict on this entire ordeal, and it is a deeply ambiguous liberation.
Let's look at how Davids ends this. Soraya leaves. Time passes. Mrs. Hadding eventually, broken by the truth, sells Heron Place. She transfers the immense financial value of the Rosa painting, the painting of the girl who looks just like Soraya, directly into a bank account for Soraya.
And then moves to London.
Right.
Yeah.
Mrs. Hadding moves to a tiny, bleak, freezing bedsit in London just to be geographically near Timothy's asylum until he finally dies. Meanwhile, Soraya returns to the quarter. She doesn't marry Noor. That is broken forever. Instead, she becomes a famous artist.
Blending calligraphy and storytelling.
Yes. She blends her father's traditional Arabic calligraphy with her own blood ink storytelling. She draws the sea woman, she draws the soap woman, she draws the gray women, and her entire artistic career is funded entirely by the money from the Rosa painting.
It is a stunning, complex, highly layered resolution. But I argue that the ending is a trap. I think it's totally insidious. Look very closely at where the money comes from.
Okay.
Soraya's liberation, her ability to be an artist, is funded entirely by colonial capital. The sale of a painting of herself, or a colonized girl exactly like her, to a wealthy English collector named Mr. Avery. She is creating beautiful art about her people's trauma, about the sea woman and the ash and who is buying it, the settlers, the wealthy white collectors who stroll down into the quarter, smoke their pipes, look at her pain on a canvas and say, fascinating. See how she has integrated the native traditions?
And I see the economic trap you were describing.
I look at this and I say, this isn't true liberation. She is still financially tethered to the empire. She is literally selling her trauma back to the people who caused it in order to survive.
It is a valid critique of how the art world consumes marginalized voices. But I argue passionately that within the world of this novel, it is the ultimate poetic justice.
How?
Think about what she's actually doing. She reclaims her stolen identity. She literalizes her blood ink into tangible art that her own people recognize and revere. When the elders in the community see her work, they weep. They say, that is my mother's story. That is our history. She takes the hoarded, stagnant wealth of Heron Place wealth that was originally extracted from her people's land and labor, and she redirects it. She uses it to sustain her family, to elevate her community, to ensure she never has to wear the obedient face again.
Yeah, right.
The painting of Rosa, which was trapped in that dark hallway for donkey's years, is finally freed into the light. And Soraya is freed. She survived the haunted house, she kept her soul intact, and she bent the colonial narrative to her own absolute will.
But does she truly own it? That is the question. That is the unresolved tension at the heart of this book. And that is the thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. As you go back to your own life, your own jobs, your own compromises, think about Soraya. When Soraya creates her beautiful, agonizing art for the wealthy collectors who nod and say fascinating without ever truly understanding the blood and the ash and the suffocating boredom behind it, who truly owns the story.
Yeah.
If you survive the haunted house, but you find that you have to sell your ghost stories back to the ghosts just to buy your freedom, have